So for instance, Ron, you were talking about you went fishing with your dad recently, right? And it was
Right.
just this cool thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
would you pick fishing to maybe do that? Like could you take your kid? I took my boys and I took all my kids down to Josh's farm, just ripping bluegills out, and it's a beautiful spring night, and I've talked about this a couple of times. We went fishing in West Virginia, and I wouldn't have paid $1 million to trade that night on this river with my kids in the mountains where the sun's setting. So, which one would you choose with that information? If there's a moment in time from one of those activities that you had to relive forever, which one of those would you
Mm.
pick or why? Your first deer, something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Brian, unless you want to think about it.
I would say it was, rifle hunting with my dad. I still, if I could relive that again, I would for sure. Being in the stand with him and just the way things happened for my first buck. I'll never forget that. None of us are getting. We talked a little bit about this earlier on before we started. None of
Mm-hmm.
us are getting any younger. I really value the time I get to spend with my dad, especially it's more on the stream now, than it is in the stand. But, um, going back, I would get back to that moment in a heartbeat. And, I could picture it like it was the other day for sure.
Okay, cool.
I've got so many memories around hunting, you know. Um, when I cut my teeth on hunting, we did a lot of driving. So if you ever hear, Buck and I talk about, driving for deer growing up, that was kind of social, where we would get a gang of guys,
Yeah.
anywhere from 8 to 12 guys, and we would push big plots of land, forests and to bottoms and across fields, and we'd be successful because of it. We strategically, we had guys that they knew the lay of the land, and we learned a lot as young guys doing that. But I remember we didn't have a lot of places. If we weren't driving for deer, we didn't have a lot of property to hunt. Um, there's some public land, around where I grew up and stuff. But I remember there was one farmer down the road, and deer, went through his bottom or whatever, and Dad had permission to go out there. And I remember sitting down with him. I remember having cold hands. We didn't have the good hunting gear. Dad would give me an old pair of jersey gloves. The minute they get wet, my hands would be freezing, but that's what I had to keep my fingers warm. So I was usually cold pretty quick. But I just remember sitting on the ground, and my dad taking me along. I was finally old enough to go along, and he had a thermos, so we had some hot tea, to warm your insides up a little bit and just try to get me to sit a little bit longer or something. You didn't see anything, probably because I couldn't sit still. But I, I don't know, man. Like that's a memory I've got. Chris, when
Mhm.
you're saying about memories, but I've got so many hunting stories that for me, like the best time of year is I'm a bow hunter. It's going up to our cabin with my brother. Um, for the rut and spending 2 or 3 days, you're packing up a cooler, we're we're drinking a bunch of beer, um heck, I staying up later than I should. I remember sitting up one night watching television. We need to get up and go hunting in the morning. It's the rut, this is what it's all about. But hell, my brother and I are just sitting up and we're watching old, hunting videos on TV, and this commercial comes on talking. It was selling like a buck grunt. It's like, 1:30 in the morning infomercial, and it's like, don't buy your buck calls from China. One of those type of buy something that's made in America. It's just the funniest thing. It's like you had to be there a moment. But I've got so many stories of just hanging out with my family at hunting camp that I'd have to say it's, bow hunting during the rut, which that's the best time to bow hunt anyway. But it's not even about hunting the rut for me. It's about the memories made, with your compadres while you're doing it. So, anything else be hard to overtake that from my lens. or my worldview.